My name is Ava. I'm 27, married, and on paper, everything looks perfect, until you look closer. I met Eric when I was barely out of college. He was older, steady, with ambition pouring out of his pores like cologne. At first, I mistook that. Ambition for passion. It wasn't. It was hunger. For success? Not for me. We've been married for 3 years. In those 3 years, I've learned how to make eggs exactly the way he likes them. I've memorized his schedule, his preferred news sources, his workout playlist, but I can't remember the last time he looked at me like I was anything more than background noise. Our mornings are mechanical. 2 cups of coffee, 1 nod, no eye contact. He scrolls. I stare out the window. Then came Daniel. I first met him at a corporate dinner, the kind where wives dress up, smile politely, and nod through conversations we're not invited into. Daniel arrived late, calm but commanding. He was Eric's boss, the owner of the company where Eric worked day and night. 60 maybe. Salt and pepper hair, expensive watch, that kind of man. But more than that, he noticed things. When he shook my hand, he didn't just glance and move on. His eyes lingered, not inappropriately, but like he was actually seeing me. Midway through dinner, as Eric laughed loudly with some client, Daniel leaned over and asked if I liked the wine. I smiled, surprised anyone had remembered I was there. He didn't flirt. He didn't need to. He asked questions and listened to the answers. And when I laughed at one of his dry comments, I realized I hadn't genuinely laughed in months. It was subtle, that moment. A seed planted in silence. Days passed. I didn't expect to see him again. But one rainy morning, I stopped at a cafe near our apartment to escape the drizzle. And there he was, Daniel. Reading a book, sipping tea, wearing a scarf that probably cost more than my wedding ring. He saw me and waved. That small gesture shouldn't have warmed me the way it did, but it did. He asked if I wanted to sit. I almost said no. I should have, but I didn't. We talked for half an hour, about books, weather, even the absurdity of social media. I forgot what time it was. He didn't ask about Eric. I didn't offer anything. When I finally got up to leave, he smiled and said, "Same time tomorrow?" I laughed. Maybe. I didn't mean to come back, but the next morning I found myself at the same cafe, at the same time, holding 2 coffees. He was already there. That's how it started. Nothing dramatic, just quiet mornings over caffeine and conversation. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not desired, not pursued, seen. Daniel asked questions no one else had thought to. Do you paint? Why don't you travel more? What makes you feel alive? Eric never asked those questions. Eric used to ask if I remembered to order groceries. One morning, Daniel brought pastries. He said he saw them and thought of me. He didn't say why. I didn't ask. I bit into one. And for some reason, tears filled my eyes. He didn't comment. He just handed me a napkin and let me be. That's when I realized something terrifying. I was happier in those 30 minutes with Daniel than I had been in 3 years of marriage. I tried pulling away, skipped a morning, stayed in bed, pretending I was tired. Eric didn't notice. He left for work without a goodbye. The silence was louder than ever. The next morning, I went back. This wasn't about love, not yet. It wasn't even about attraction. It was about presence. Daniel looked at me like I mattered, and I craved that like oxygen. Our routine became its own kind of intimacy. Every morning, same cafe, same seats, same rhythm. We never talked about what we were doing. We just did it. One morning, as I reached for my coffee, our fingers brushed. I pulled back quickly. He didn't. He just looked at me and said, "You Don't have to feel guilty for being human. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee and stared out at the rainy street. That was the moment everything started to shift. Not in some dramatic movie scene way. Quietly, slowly, like a tide turning when no one's looking. And deep down, I think I knew. Something was coming. Something that would shatter everything. The shift from innocent mornings to forbidden territory wasn't a leap. It was a slow erosion. One unnoticed glance at a time. One quiet heartbeat after another. Eric left for a 5-day business trip in Chicago. He didn't tell me until the night before. No dinner plan, no kiss goodbye, just a suitcase packed with his usual haste and a text to his driver. I watched him from the bedroom doorway, feeling less like a wife and more like furniture. "Need anything while I'm gone?" he asked, distractedly tying his tie. "No," I said. He nodded and left. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, rolled over and stared at the empty side of the bed. The silence felt thicker now, not peaceful, but hollow. My hands moved on their own, brushing my hair, choosing my softest sweater, checking the weather. I didn't have to wonder where I was going. Daniel was already seated when I arrived. Same table, same coffee. His eyes lit up when he saw me. I smiled before I even realized it. "Morning," I said, sitting down. "You look rested," he replied. "Eric away?" I hesitated. "Yeah, Chicago." He nodded, and that was all. No judgment, no leading questions, just warm pastries between us and a view of the quiet street outside. We sat longer than usual. The cafe emptied, then filled. Again. I didn't want to leave. When I glanced at my phone, it was past 10. "Want to walk a bit?" he asked. I agreed without thinking. We wandered through a nearby park. The air was crisp, and birds darted between the trees. He told me stories from his childhood, how he once got lost in Rome at 16, how he learned to sail before he could drive. I laughed more than I should have. When we sat on a bench, I realized how close we were. Not touching, but close enough to feel the heat from his body. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" I asked. "All the time," he said. I looked at him then, really looked. There were lines around his eyes, deep but kind. His hands, resting on his lap, were large and weathered, hands that had held and lost and built and let go. He wasn't flawless. He was real. That scared me. We parted at the park gate. No hug, no goodbye, just a look, lingering and heavy. The next morning, I didn't even pretend to hesitate. It rained. Lightly, but enough to scatter the regular cafe crowd. Daniel smiled when I arrived, holding an umbrella. "Want to come up?" he asked. "Coffee's better at my place, less watery." I paused. A long pause, but my feet moved forward. His apartment was exactly what I expected. Tasteful, quiet, full of soft light, and the scent of something herbal. He handed me a mug, let me pick the music. We didn't talk much at first, just sat on his leather couch, side by side, sipping in silence. Then he turned to me and said, "I don't want to ruin this." "This?" I asked. He nodded. "Whatever it is we're doing, it matters to me." Something in my chest tightened. I didn't know what to say, but I did know what I wanted. Not drama, not chaos, just one moment where I felt like I wasn't invisible. He reached out, slowly, gave me the space to pull away. I didn't. The kiss was gentle, not desperate. It wasn't about lust. It was about being seen, held, chosen. For once, I didn't feel like I was falling into something wrong. I felt like I was stepping out of something false. We didn't rush. No clothes ripped, no hearts racing. Just two people peeling back years of loneliness, layer by layer. When I finally dressed to leave, he handed me a fresh coffee and a to-go. cup. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. I smiled. Maybe. But we both knew it wasn't a maybe. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. My hands moved without hesitation. Hair, sweater, perfume. My wedding ring caught the light for a second, and I turned it inward so the diamonds pressed against my palm. I didn't want to think about what this made me. I didn't want to name it. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I felt alive, and I wasn't ready to give that up. It was the text that cracked the illusion. A single message, sent too casually, displayed too boldly on my phone's lock screen. "You remembered the blueberry ones. See you tomorrow, sunshine. D." I hadn't even heard the door open when Eric returned from his trip. I was standing at the kitchen counter pouring tea when his voice landed behind me. "Who's D?" The teacup nearly slipped from my fingers. I turned, too slowly. "What?" I asked, stalling. Eric held up my phone, the screen still glowing. His expression was unreadable, flat, quiet, but his knuckles were white against the glass. "It's just Daniel," I said quickly, trying to sound casual. "We sometimes meet for coffee." He stared at me, his silence colder than any accusation. "Why would he call you sunshine?" he asked. I had no answer that wouldn't be a lie or a confession. Eric placed the phone down like it was something fragile. Then, he walked past me without another word. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand an explanation. Somehow that made it worse. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. I stood at the window, watching the street, torn between guilt and longing. Daniel would be there, waiting, patient, holding a cup just for me. I imagined the puzzled look on his face as he stared at the empty seat across from him. Would he wonder if I'd changed my mind, or if I'd finally been caught? I stayed home. Eric didn't speak to me that morning. He poured his coffee, glanced at his phone, and left. No confrontation, just absence. That same emotional vacancy that had been killing our marriage long before Daniel ever touched me. The following day, I went back. Daniel smiled when he saw me, but his eyes studied my face longer than usual. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but the answer wasn't convincing. "Eric knows," I whispered. Daniel paused, setting down his cup. And nothing. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just shut down. Daniel reached across the table and gently took my hand. "He's grieving the version of you he didn't know he'd lost." I looked down at our intertwined fingers. I don't think he ever knew me to begin with. The cafe felt smaller that day. Not cozier, compressed. Like the walls had moved in closer, suffocating the space between right and wrong. We finished our coffee in silence. Over the next few days, the air in my apartment became unbearable. Eric would come home, eat dinner in silence, and disappear into the office. The few times we crossed paths, he looked past me like I was a shadow on the wall. And yet, he didn't leave. That was the strangest part. He stayed, like someone waiting, for a fire to burn itself out instead of putting it out. One night, I finally asked, "Why aren't you saying anything?" He didn't look up from his laptop, because it wouldn't matter. It would to me. Eric closed the screen, and finally met my eyes. Would it? I didn't answer. He stood up, walked toward the door, and paused. "You're not the only one who's been lonely, Ava. I just didn't look for someone else to fill the space." Then he left. The next morning, I sat across from Daniel. But something had shifted. The comfort was gone. What used to be warm now felt artificial, like we were playing roles in a story neither of us fully believed in anymore. Daniel must have sensed it too. Is this still what you want?" he asked gently. I thought for a long time before answering. I wanted to be wanted. I wanted to feel alive. And you gave me that. He nodded, waiting. But I don't think this ends the way either of us hoped. Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then don't let it become something you resent. You were never a mistake, Ava. You were a wake-up call. I stood to leave. This time, he didn't ask if I'd return tomorrow. At home, Eric's suitcase was by the door. "I'm going to stay with my brother for a while," he said without turning around. I didn't try to stop him. After he left, I sat in the silence. That followed. It was the same quiet I used to fear, but now, it felt honest, heavy but clean. The next morning, I made a cup of coffee. Just one. Sat by the window. No cafe, no Daniel, no Eric, just me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was missing something.